Welcome to the Nature Journal Educators Forum. So we are, today, we're getting together to talk about what to do when things go wrong. And because I know we've all had these great lesson plans, and then it's not happening. So I thought I might just start with a few anecdotes on my end, and then open it up to whichever way you want to go. A couple of strategies that you might want to take during this call. One is just have a pad of paper in front of you and a pencil in your hand. If there are any ideas that are interesting to you, jot them down, and even better, as you jot them down, make a little visual icon that somehow relates to that idea. So kind of sketch noting what we're talking about here. If you've got a comment or thought that you want to share, write that down too, because otherwise you forget what it was you were going to say. So you can make little bullet points for your things of things I want to add and inject into this conversation. So anything that ideas that occur to you in your occurdum, you want to share out there, and then anything that any new thoughts you want to also get those down on a piece of paper. So this is, when we're doing these things, what a great opportunity for us to sketch note and practice our sketchnoting, a worry-free space, because otherwise you wouldn't be taking any notes. So you've got nothing to lose. All right, so today's topic is what to do when things go wrong. And so I thought I would just share a kind of a handful of experiences that I've had, because I've taught lots of workshops, lots of classes, and sometimes they go south. So how are you going to handle it? If you are, sometimes I've been out in the field with a group of students, and I've got my plans of, I want to go do this nature journaling activity. And I kind of, corral all the kids and explain what I want them to do. And they're kind of fidgety and they're kind of bouncing around. And it's like the energy just is not right for this activity. I've tried it before, and it's a great activity. I know it works, but it's not happening. Sometimes the energy of the group that you're working with, the energy of the group at the time that you're working with them, it's a disconnect. And they're not in a place for sitting down and focusing. A general thing that I've found often works is that if people aren't into nature journaling now, maybe they will be later. And it's good to get some exercise between now and then. So you can scamper up to the top of the hill. Like, let's go see the top of the peak, and what can we see from there? Or you go down to the creek and you explore around, or whatever it is, you want to go do something active. And because if there's a lot of active energy and you're going like, no, let's be really still and focused and really concentrate. They're here and you're here, and you're trying to pull them down here, and they're wanting, and it's not going to end up well for you. So what I often will try to do is to kind of figure out where their energy is and kind of connect with them there. And because I can be really active, I can play, I can explore. And then once we've had a chance to do that, we'll find some phenomenon that helps us, start to focus in. And then when I feel that kind of energy starting to kind of go from like woohoo to like, right, then it's time for me to pull out the nature journaling activity. So sometimes, like if people arrive, if you've got a site and people come out on a bus, they're going to be here for the next, 2.5 hours. They have been ridden on the bus to get to you for already an hour and a half. And they arrive and they're like I've been sitting, I've done the sitting thing. I'm not down with this. So if you like, then kind of like, okay, that's cool, because we're now going to sit some more because we're nature journaling. Right? No, so I want to meet them where they are, and And then then you can, once you kind of connect with that energy of the group, you can then sort of pull that into a state of focus where you can do your game, or help them. There are other times though that it's just it's not going to happen, and so feel free, if you have plans of doing nature journaling in a time slot in your curriculum. There are times that I can't figure it out. Some days I had planned to do nature journaling with a group of students, and it just didn't work. And that's okay. If their energy sort of stays high, there's lots of things you can do to engage with nature at that higher energy state. So what my first thought is, I'm not going to force it. I want to meet them where they are, and then together we go on this journey through nature to make that happen. Always remember, when you're doing stuff in the field, that hike up to the top of the hill, when you are, if you're a classroom teacher, it's a lot more challenging, because you can't go like this is the point in my curriculum where we're going to do some nature journaling, and their energy isn't there. But you know, in 45 minutes, it's going to be PE. And this is the time that you have blocked for it. You already are encountering that same sort of mismatch of energy for a lot of other things that you do. So whatever strategies that you regularly use to kind of handle those situations are probably going to work here too. Be aware that the first few times you take your students outside, being outside is a big distraction. Anything new is a big distraction. So the first several outings, like if you're regularly doing stuff in a classroom and you take your kids outdoors, it's new, it's exciting, everybody's going, well, we're on a field trip. and it's and we can't zero in. I often think of the first few times you take a group of students outdoors, those are also going to be sacrificial pancakes, right? You need to kind of just get used to, like, it's the novelty of being outside. Anytime you introduce something new, it's going to be a distraction. Like, you give students a bunch of colored pencils, they're going, I got a blue one. And you give students a magnifying glass, like they're like, ooh, and they're lighting fires. And so later on, it becomes a tool. But the first time you introduce it, it's a distraction. But you kind of got to work through that distraction to turn it into the tool. So don't blame the fact that you took your students outside to do a nature journaling activity and the nature journaling activity didn't work. If you had gone out there to make pizza, that wouldn't have worked either. And so it's not necessarily nature journaling's fault. You just sort of got to remember that the more you can kind of get going outside into a regular routine, then that is going to help you be able to then have this nature journaling be you can then grab your stuff. You can then pop out for 45 minutes and do stuff. It's not your first time outdoors, and then you're good to go. I want to bring Billy Joe in on this, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, I saw you participating in the chat with your ideas. All right, so I'm going to bring you in here. And hey, Billy Joe, what do you think?
Hey, yeah, it's great to see everyone as well. Happy to be back for another week. So I just mentioned in the chat that as educators, we really need to remember that it's not about us and our agenda. It's really about the students. And so some students are able to, like, you might have that class who's really able to flip on a dime and be able to just go with it. And you have other classes that are just not going to be able to do that. And I always kind of go back to some of the special education classes, the behavior classes that I work with. And yeah, taking them outside, like, I don't know what happened before they got to school that day. I don't know if they already had an issue before I got there. So I sometimes walk into the class and it's chaos. Kids are screaming, yelling. Like, the last thing they want to do is sit down for a nice calming nature journal session. But what I've found in the past is exactly what you said, Jack, is taking them for a walk. And I don't do anything. I just say, let's go. And you just let them naturally find their rhythm in the forest and their rhythm with each other, and you naturally sort of watch that come down. And then once you get a sense that that's kind of where they're at, you can start to introduce small things first, like, hey, did you notice this? Or hey, do you see that? And then they kind of start to pick up on that as well. And for me, that's been some things that I've really noticed. And so I always show up, if it's one of my behavioral classes, with a kind of agenda. Like, this is what I'm kind of going to do today. And then, kind of go from there and really let them sort of dictate it. And so maybe, that day, you start looking at, I notice, and that's really where you get to. And that's fine, because you're going to go, maybe, for me, I don't see them every day, right? So then I'm going to come back the next time, and maybe we start to add in, maybe we're only doing it verbally the first time, and then we're getting into the other stuff, right? So it's all about baby steps. And I know that, like, here in Canada, it's the same thing. We have some teachers who are really go-getters about getting outside. So their kids are like, we get it. We're going outside to learn. And just like Jack said, some other kids, I go into their class and they're like, field trip, new teacher, oh my gosh. And they get crazy, right? And then you're like, oh, this isn't going to work. So you just need to be really flexible, I think, is the big thing. And like, what can you find? So that phenomenon, like, what can you find that's going to get them excited? And then, naturally in that discussion, you're going to say, well, what are you noticing? What are you wondering? What are you this? What are you that? And so sometimes for me, maybe I am doing the introduction and I'm setting it up for the teacher to then take them outside the next time with paper and pencil. So, I think it's collaboration with your teacher, and depending on what your role is, right? Like, some of us are in class teachers, which means you get the next day to try. Whereas with me, I don't get the next day, but what I can do is hopefully set them up and support them in a different way. So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can sort of do that, but being flexible. And I think the biggest thing is like being comfortable in your space, right? So like, if I went to California and started teaching, I'd be like, ugh, I don't know anything about the ecosystem that's going on there, right? Whereas here in Ontario, I'm very comfortable going out and just being like, let's look under a log and see what's going on. Boom, there's phenomenon right there, right? You've got them all excited and ready to go and ready to look. So I think that's the biggest thing, is being comfortable in the environment that you're in, and being able to sort of, be flexible to kind of go through that, and know that your agenda is your idea, but it's not set in stone. The kids are really going to dictate that. That's from my own experience, sort of working in outdoor ed, and kind of being the person who comes in, or being the person who's welcoming them all off the bus. It's that kind of that same thing. So that's my experience anyways.
Hey, I got a lot of cool sketch notes off of that. You think visually, so there's as Billy Joe's talking, look for opportunities to turn what she says into sketch notes, right? This idea of finding your rhythm, the kind of going for the clearing walk, right? Now, there are days when my curriculum went from, I'm going to teach about I was going to teach about trophic levels. And really, I'm realizing what we're going to teach about is, today's theme is that it is safe to be outside. It is good to breathe clean air and get some exercise. And what are some strategies we can use to be more kind and respectful of each other? That's my curriculum for the day. I love what you're saying about those baby steps. You can give a little piece, and you're building. So it's not all about right now. It's not about this program right now. You've got the long view. You're either setting yourself up for the next time you're taking them out, or you're setting the teacher up to be successful in the next time that they take the students out. Did everybody get that kind of agenda thing? I wrote that down, right? I'm going to put that in block letters, Billy Joe. But
So I'm the worst, just so you all know. I'm the worst for having like an actual lesson plan. I'm a fly by the seat of my pants kind of gal. So, like today I did a walk on soils and plants. I was like, yeah, I know lots about soils and plants. So let's just go see what we can find. And, you just go out there and you immerse yourself in it. And it's amazing what's going to come out of those conversations. Whereas if I had some kind of scripted lesson plan, to me it's not authentic. And so I just want to really, be me and sort of be in there. And like I said before, like that they get to come and sort of enjoy that ride with me about what's going on in the forest kind of today, right? So I get that there are certain times where I do need to have like a full on plan, and there's other times where I'm just like, let's see what happens, and it always turns out pretty awesome. So anyways,
yeah.
that's just me. Not everybody can do that. And so I get that, right? Like some people are like super duper organized. I'm just not.
But so what I hear you saying is that you're finding it's really effective to be flexible both to the environment. You want to have some general meta idea in your head of where you're going, but you're
Yes.
willing to abandon that because here are the variables. What's
Yep.
going to be going on with the kids? What is going to be going on with the physical conditions outside?
Yep.
What is going to be going on with what phenomena you actually encounter? All those variables are in flux. So
Yep.
if you're sticking to the script,
Yeah.
all right, there is
You've left yourself no space to go, right? Like you've left yourself no space to go. So if you're like, I'm going to talk about snails today when I'm outside, great. What happens if you don't find a snail? Like then there goes your entire lesson plan, right? Like everything that you wanted to talk about. So be like, oh, it's raining today, so we should see some snails. I'm going to be on the trails, so I'm going to talk about compaction here. I'm going to go into the forest, I'm going to look at the humus layer here. What kind of creatures might I find out here? So I have a general idea, but it's not a set in stone, because some kid might say to me, we're talking about plants, Miss Reed, and I'm wondering about bees. Okay. So, like, let's talk about bees, right? There's no bees here, but I'm a beekeeper. So, like, let's talk about bees. So then, it's able to spiral, and then I can connect it back to what's happening. But bees weren't on my agenda, but I'm able to connect bees into the soils and plants because I'm comfortable in that. And I've made that flexible enough that the kids can ask those questions, right? So I think that that's kind of where I come at it from.
yeah, so I want to sort of tag one thought out onto that, and then I want to bring Katya into this conversation as well. So I'm going to add her to the spotlight right now. Hey, but first I just want to tag one thought onto what Billy Joe just said, and that is that so you were going to be talking about plants. Now Billy Joe is making a shift over to bees. Less important than the specific topic that you're covering is the way that you are covering it. And that idea is now supported by, here in the United States, we have the next generation science standards. I love me some next generation science standards. And what it is, it's a new, it's a sort of evidence-based way of teaching science. And what they call the disciplinary core ideas are like the basic things like here's some information about bees, here's some information about flowers, right? It's not all about those disciplinary core ideas anymore. It's more about, it's equally about the way you think about things, the science and engineering, and the way you do things, the practices of science, and the way you think about things, that what they call the cross-cutting concepts. And so even if you pivot over to bees and you're still using these sort of practices of science and sort of engaging with ideas as a scientist, you're still hitting all of your science and engineering practices and your cross-cutting concepts. And you're not off script at all, because we're teaching how to think and engage with the world around us. Katya, sorry for that.
Well,
yes.
Nope. I was going to say, you were talking about things like you want to go and start them with specific materials like magnifying glasses or colored pencils. Now, I work with small children. So what I always did is when I wanted to introduce something new, part of my lesson plan in California, you have to have a lesson plan, or at least in Los Angeles, you have to have a lesson plan. I would give them exploration time. So I would give them like some basic rules, like a magnifying glass is not for digging, because I would have kids who look at the shape of it and be like, oh, I could scoop out the dirt in this plant. But I would give them some basics, but then I would let them take magnifying glasses and go all around the room and look at whatever they wanted to look at and see things. And then we might talk about what would you like to look at in under a magnifying glass. So I did that with a lot of materials because small kids need that time to become comfortable. And even in the outdoors, as you were saying about bringing them outdoors and just taking them for a walk and letting them look around and letting them listen and smell and observe their environment to give them that comfort zone is a good idea. So
really reinforcing this idea of when there's a new experience, you're first going to engage with that in a way that's on their own terms.
Exactly.
That makes absolute sense. So I've got a magnifying glass. Let's play with magnifying glass, and we're not going to use it as a shovel, and we're not going to kill the ant. And
exactly.
Play. And that makes
see them and they walk up to one another and they have the glass right in the other person's face and they're enjoying it. What does your magnifying glass look like if we hold them together and we look at each other through both? So they have all sorts of interesting things they do. Sometimes they'll notice that if they turn it the right way, they might get a prism because some of the magnifying glasses are just not necessarily very good, but so they get all different kinds of ideas, which is good.
Yeah. So perhaps a fun open-ended prompt is, what are some of the ways that what are things that this tool does, and what can you do to kind of make it work best for you, and sort of prompt them to kind of play and explore with that. I love that idea for introducing a new tool. And as you're saying, same concept applies for those days when you first start going outside.
Exactly.
Let's see, I am Chris, is it okay if I
Sure.
bring you in on
Sure.
all this conversation?
Sure. I stopped my video because I had just realized I'm on 1% power, but I did a lot of work with junior high school students, and 7th and 8th grade. There was one whole thing in the spring that I did where I didn't really care what the lesson content was. All I wanted was for them to learn the basic how-tos, just what you're talking about. But this was back in the 70s, and they wrote their own goals. And before we left to go out, everyone had their own thing that they were going to look for. They went crazy when we hiked to the lake and went out in the woods, but I just let go of the notion that there was any lesson other than get out and everybody go look for what you're going to investigate. It was a headache for administration because I obviously couldn't supervise everybody, but all at once. There was a lot of trust, but it turned out to be one of the richest learning things. There were kids investigating plants that grow wild that we can eat, and they were off in this direction while I had kids down at the lake. It was absolutely an amazing thing, and it lasted maybe it was about a 6-week unit where they just did a deep dive into something that they wanted. And I think for older kids, this is a wonderful motivator. Rather than you directing it, let them direct it. And you can sit down with them and say, but what are you going to see? What do you hope to learn? What do you, how can I help you? And it was crazy, but it worked. And then they infected each other with their projects.
So you are giving students permission and room to do more self-directed studies in a natural place?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a science curriculum that we covered, But near the end of the year in the spring, when they'd covered, you know, all the basics, then we just turned them loose on their own project. And it was really
so you're not hitting this at the start. You're first
Mm-hmm.
scaffolding them. You're setting them up for success with some scaffolding,
right.
giving them some structure to investigate in, and some
Right.
basic thinking tools, observation tools, and science concepts.
Right, and it was not thrust on them. They knew all year long that if they hung in there with us, that the other teacher that I team taught with and I would help them with whatever their interest was at the end of the year. So they had a lot of time to think about what they were going to do. And we did it for so many years. Kids kind of played with what they were going to do. You know, they did do a lot of thinking.
Yeah, the next generation science standards talk a lot about asking questions and then designing your experiments around them.
Right.
The old model used to be that the teacher would come up with an experiment that they would describe for everybody, and then the students would go do. So essentially,
Right.
the students are learning not how to be a scientist, but how to be a lab technician.
Yeah.
Because all the thinking is in asking the question and setting that up.
Yep. I wish that we'd had these standards back then. We were kind of jumping out in a direction that not everyone understood, but it was a valuable one. So, yeah.
Right. So teachers who've been in the field a long time are already doing this, even when their standards weren't supporting that, because they saw that worked, that
Right.
that had the impact, and you saw the level of engagement. There's something wonderful about you're giving them permission to step in that role. I think that is the trust in them is probably, I would imagine that is also part of it, because you're having to take a leap of faith that if I relinquish the reins of controlling the airtime in every minute, that you're still going to get an education. And you're letting them, by being self-directed, you're pulling in sort of one of the critical elements of intrinsic motivation. So we can motivate our students. So in human motivation, there's extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. The extrinsic motivation is, you do this and you're going to get an A. You do this and you're going to get a cookie. You do this and you're going to get something, money, whatever it is, from me. The things that motivate intrinsic motivation, and they've sort of found that there are 3 critical ones. You can sketch note these if you want, right? They're autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy is the more that you kind of can move towards self-directed. Think about this in your own life, your own career. The more that you are able to not be doing what somebody else told you, you've got more buy-in when you get to decide it. So you are giving that autonomy to your students. You're building into your curriculum there some intrinsic motivation. And mastery is that the more you kind of develop something, the more you develop those skills. And purpose is that when you sort of really believe in the mission behind what you're doing. But I really see that you kind of tying into that mastery, the autonomy piece of that in your design there. And and it's also interesting to note that comes, that you've created a scaffolding, given them tools, and then for the real meaning making is where they get to take those tools and put it to use. You're backing up and letting them go there. That's a beautiful visual of how education could go. And I wish that you were my daughter's teacher.
The trust thing came in really in a big way when the kids that gathered edible plants wanted some kind of way to test it. And they journaled everything that they found, identified them all, but they made a salad and came in, and the principal and I had to eat their salad as a final exam from them. We couldn't force them to eat it, but we both agreed that we would probably survive.
That is you're putting your trust in them, and they're trusting you. That's beautiful.
That was big.
I'm glad they were able to identify their nightshades correctly, and the fact that we're still having this conversation.
That was fun.
So can you say a little bit more about what in order? I'm just getting a sense here, kind of a hit, that this idea of trust might have been a thread in other ways throughout your teaching and the relationship that you developed with your students. What is the role of that in when things kind of go wrong and you're kind of having those days where you struggle?
Oh boy, it happened almost every day. There were two of us going different directions outside, and we had outside days, maybe 3 out of the 5 in the week. And then the inside days, they were making products that could teach others what they had done. So we weren't nature journaling as such, but we were notating and doing some kind of visual thing, project. And so we did a couple of times have to have one of us out in the field and the other in the classroom so that we could cover both places, because some folks couldn't go out because they did something wrong or ran off. But 8th graders, they're old kids. And if you trust them, they will trust you. And I think in a small school, you've known them. I taught there long enough that you know them all the way through. So you know kind of who you can trust and what you can trust will happen. I think those students were part of the first environmental active groups on the first, it was Protect Your Environment, I think, PYE clubs. And back then it was sort of unheard of that you did this kind of thing, but they held meetings for everyone in town. They did all kinds of things. They really took their learning to another. I can't find it anymore, but we even wrote an addendum to the Pledge of Allegiance that everybody took as a pledge and wore. And it was about protecting clean waters, clean air, etc. And they believed in it. So, it created a trust. Yeah.
So you're stepping back, you're giving them tools to make good decisions and to kind of do their science investigation.
Right.
You are then supporting them in they're getting in front of the city and the community doing this, and you're also supporting them kind of, let's bring this into our pledge and our identity.
It was amazing.
That is, that's what happens with intrinsic motivation, right?
Yes.
Intrinsic, if you're driven from a fire inside of you, then it's not like, okay, I've finished my the fill in the blank worksheet that you gave me and I'm done, I'm ready to go out to play.
Yeah.
That obviously required all sorts of outside of school work and engagement. That's
if you can set it up so that there is that kind of reinforcement. We actually took them to the radio station and they each this is part of science. They taped a 3-minute verbal thing from each child of a way that you could make the world better, protect your environment. And it could be anything they dreamed up, but we checked over and over again what they wrote. And then they rehearsed it. And then they went in and read these off. And the radio station guy was excellent. And he made these little time slots out of them and played them on the live radio every day in between advertisements whenever he had downtime. And there'd just be a little kid's voice saying, you know, put a brick in your toilet tank, that saves this much water per flush. You know,
Yeah.
any little thing. And
Yep.
those kinds of things were rewards to them and built the trust. Actually, they were rewarded with a field trip. The community and the principal voted to let them go anywhere they wanted on a school bus for a field trip because of the work they did. And they decided that they wanted to go on a field trip around and pick up trash, which blew me away.
See, but you had the bravery to step back and let that happen. But that also doesn't happen without the scaffolding.
It doesn't. And you have to build that with administrators too. But
oh boy,
if you sense that it's starting to build and you don't get in the way of it, I think it can go a long way.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it's off the beaten track from nature journaling in a way, but there were lots of ways in which they did journal, but that wasn't the end product at all. It was their involvement in changing their minds about things. Yeah. And I think in a way we pitted them to changing their parents' minds. They would come home, you know, so go look around your house and see ways that your house could be run in a better way, you know, and they'd come back and we discuss it. And, you know.
Chris, can you come to San Mateo and start teaching?
Maybe, but I think it's a little late for me to begin. But I plan on writing about it.
Billy Joe has just put a note in the chat. Tell us a little bit about that, Billy Joe, and maybe give the citation out loud so that people who are watching this on video can see what that is.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we have like a PD sort of thing in the summer for teachers, and this gentleman, John Spencer, and so his email address is in here. It's spencerauthor@.com, so SPENCERAUTHOR.com. And so he's an author, and he really discusses a lot of things about maker and sort of letting kids carving out time in the curriculum to allow students to come up with their own kind of like a passion project, right? So what do they want to do? And it can be anything. So it could be about the environment, it could be in any strand of science, whatever it is. And then you actually are just there to sort of facilitate and sort of like, you know, support them through whatever it is that they want. But the one thing that he was saying at the end is to actually get them to share, and not just like with you, but to share it, right, with everyone. And because there's such a big, you know, piece of like, this is what I've done, right? Like, look at how good I've done. And you get this sense of confidence, you get a lot more buy-in. And that's made me think of Chris taking them all to the radio station. And it's their voice, it's their thoughts, it's their rehearsing that is sort of being fed out into the entire community, which is, these are my thoughts, these are what I think is right. And I'm backing that up, like Jack says, with some science, right? Like, this is how I'm going to share that. And how amazing is that for students? So sometimes that gets lost, I think, when we just hand in an assignment, right? We just hand it in, or we're made to present something that we're also made to do. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we haven't chosen what we wanted to do. And I think so there's that authenticity that's missing in that piece. So give them time within that curriculum space, that because obviously you need to hit all the marks, but you will. right? There'll be math in that. There'll be writing in that. There'll be science in that. It'll all
Right.
be there. And it's up to us to do that. And so I really just thought, Chris, that was so cool. Like to have them go to the radio station and to be the voice. Like how amazing is that? So that's what it made me think of. He's got a really great book and it's a super easy read. Anyways, and I think he's on Twitter and stuff too. But it was a great presentation. But
Thank you.
I've read a few things. So great job, Chris. I thought that was so awesome. So thank you.
I'll look that up.
Yeah, it's exciting to see the degree to which we have that we have just such an experience bank behind these meetings. There's real wisdom in when we kind of take the collective knowledge of this community.
Your comment about that there were 3 intrinsic motives, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I think really the connecting it with the community gives them a purpose. And making it
right.
in real life, make it why we're learning it. It's real, and you can affect the learning of others. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that it's interesting. This is I think this thread, the idea of intrinsic motivation in education. We're here. The official topic was problem solving, but I don't want that to get. I don't want this idea of the power of this intrinsic motivation to get lost as we kind of go to things. So whatever you do in your sketch notes to kind of point an arrow to something, I think that this is something that is really worth our considering more in thinking about the way that how do the experiences which we create for our students, how do these relate to and connect with the power of intrinsic motivation?
Yeah, it solves a lot of problems when they're that engaged, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Before we jump back to kind of this sort of things going wrong, just let's spend just a moment more on this in the topic of intrinsic motivation and nature journaling, science education. Does anybody have a thought to share on that?
I can see, just jump in. My experience from this semester is I've seen evidence that it's important. And the difference between people who had an intrinsic motivation and those who did not, in terms of what they learned and if I'm judging what they produced for their nature journal. I don't know if people remember that I teach elementary education majors. Just a huge variety of, or huge there was just all sorts of differences, and there were the those who just really ran with it and got so much out of it, and then the ones that were just doing it because it was for points. You could tell the difference from a long way off. So but they did claim that they had mental health benefits from being outside, so that was one of my primary motivations. So
Nice.
Goals.
Thank you for sharing that. So you saw a reflection of that in the education students that you're working with, that where people were kind of driven by an inner fire, there was a big difference in the way they engaged and what they produced, perhaps that being a reflection of what they got out of the experience with you.
Yeah, they also, so the very last set of stuff was for them to try to find something to investigate at their sit spot. And it seemed as if you could tell those who were at their sit spot in a genuine space of curiosity versus those who were
putting in their time.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, you could tell. I think that I learned a lot, and there's a lot to do differently, probably in the future. It was very difficult because it was all remote, so everybody was by themselves, and so figuring out how to share things in a way that had a growth mindset and I haven't figured all that out yet, but you could definitely, you can tell. I know everybody's a teacher. You can tell between, well, most of the time, between those who are doing it because they want to learn something and those who are doing it even just to please you, because sometimes that's the motivator.
Mhm.
That's it.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Laura. Rebekah, can I bring you in on this? You had some thoughts of connecting with intrinsic motivation there.
Sure. Hi. Yeah, back when Chris was talking, I started, and she kind of already said it, but it made me think about, if you set up for them to have intrinsic motivation, since the topic today was supposed to be solving problems, then maybe that's preempting the problems before they even come up, because if they're already interested and they're already engaged, then it wouldn't be a problem for them not to be engaged.
Mm-hmm. So perhaps a lot of the problems that you don't end up then trying to solve as many problems if they're doing it for a reason within. That makes a lot of sense.
It wouldn't prevent all problems, but it might prevent some.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I want to just throw out just a couple of sort of mini problem solvers that I've found to journaling situations when things kind of go wrong a little. So I'm going to give you some scenarios. You're out with a group of students. You're in nature journaling together. You set up the activity. Any questions? No. They spread out. They're safe. They're doing it. You put their heads down. 30 seconds later, the first kid goes, "I'm done." You been there? And then they stand up and then they walk over to see what their friend is doing. And their friend's going like, "Oh, you're done? All right, okay, I'm done too." And then they want to go down by the creek and chuck rocks while somebody else is kind of still doing their thing. And then people are, and then you're, right? Anybody been there? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Check this out. We figured out how to handle "I'm done." And my first response was like, if you finish early, just stay put where you are and don't distract other people because you don't want to be disrespectful to them. That works. And because then they're still sitting there kind of going like, dun, 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 dun. So a couple of workarounds for that. The best is to preempt it. And that is that you let the group know that in this activity, and actually in a lot of the other things that you're going to be doing, partway through, you're going to get a really interesting feeling. a feeling that you're done, right? You know what the feeling I'm talking about. When you've finished an activity, you feel done. So it's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to me. It's going to happen to everybody. It's going to happen to all of us at different times during this project. And then just let them know that, now the thing is that's interesting about done, what we're doing here is we're out in nature, we're making observations. And the number of possible observations that you can make about something, or questions that you can ask, or connections that you can make, is actually infinite. So the concept of done actually doesn't really apply to what we're doing here. You still will get the feeling though, because what done is your brain is going like, hey, you know what? For your survival, it's okay if you stop paying attention right now, right? So your brain is kind of going like, for your survival, we're cool. So what you want to do is just notice when in this process you get that feeling of done. And when you do, that's the point where you usually stop paying attention. And then what you can do is you go like, oh, cool, there's done, right? You say like, hi, done, and done says, hi, you want to stop? And then you can go like, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see like, what's the most interesting observation that I can make once done shows up? What's the most interesting question that I can ask? What else can I see, perceive, ask, connect after I get that feeling? Because from that point on, once done shows up, this is the point where normally your brain would have shut off with this. So what do you notice when you push past the point where you usually stop paying attention? That's your challenge for this nature journaling activity. And then we can and then we have a discussion about it. We'll come into our group and everybody will have their journals. We'll say like, all right, what is the most interesting question that somebody asked after done showed up? What's the most interesting observation that you made, right? What was something you were able to add to your journal after you got that feeling of being done? And then explore that. And isn't that interesting? Oh, okay. So, and then, because then they get hit by done, and then done is no longer done. Another thing that I notice is that sometimes I'll look out there and there's a student, they've got their journal in front of them and they're going like this. And you look down on the page and they've got a couple of things, some notes, made a little sketch. And you walk up to them and you go like, how you doing? And they were like, I'm done. And so you put, your observations, your questions, and your connections down on there, like, right? So I go like, so let's take a look at this. What? And they look down the page and it's like, oh, I see you've observed this. That's a good observation. Then we look over at the plant and say like, what more can we see? Right? What more can we notice here? Tell me something else about it, right? Tell me what else can you say about this that isn't on that piece of paper? And or you just can ask them like, okay, so tell me a little bit more about this thing you're looking at. And then they'll start making all these observations. And it's like, well, it's got these hairs here. And they're like, and you listen for a little while and you're like, okay, cool, great. Yeah, put that down. So what you do is you just get them to verbalize all the observations or questions or things that they do. And once they've verbalized it, then it's easier to get it. Then you realize, oh, I've actually got a bunch of concrete thoughts about it. So it's not a gotcha. It's that we're just using the production effect. We're using verbalizing. We get them to verbalize whatever it is that they're looking at. And then you can prompt them, all right, great, let's put that down on the paper. You can do that with words. You can do that with a picture. And that question that you came up with, that was really good. I put that one down too. So those are a couple of strategies for commonly encountered problems. Another thing that I'll notice is that there will be students in the group who are shy to share their journal with other people. And it usually is something around feeling shy about their artwork. They're feeling judged. So when we do have journals out, I look at the journal pages, and So I'm very specific in how I give feedback to students. We've talked about this before, about the idea that I don't say, hey, good job, that's a pretty picture, because we're not about pretty pictures. I'm connecting with whatever observations or questions they made and interacting with those. Very often when I'm giving feedback on a student's journal page where this is like the class drawer, the kid who's practiced drawing more, and it's a really more sophisticated, nuanced drawing, I will often give comments about the question that they asked, just to kind of make it clear that I'm interested in all these thoughts and ideas and not going to get wrapped around the axle about the pretty picture. I will also point out a strategy I'll look for, is there any strategy in the journal of the student who's feeling uncomfortable that I can point out that is an idea that other people can use. So for instance, if they drew something from the top in a side view, right? Or they put a bunch of observations in a little bullet point list. Whatever it is that they did, they put a little cloud next to their metadata to show it was a cloudy day. And I will say, look at what this student did. Like, this is a really interesting idea, and you can do this in your journals too. That, when you put those little icons next to those things in the list, it really makes each one stand out easier. It's easy to look down at this page and scan and to notice what you've noticed. And then later on, I can refer to that. Like, remember the Samantha technique of putting those little icons by those things? You can try that on your page as well, right? But I just called it the Samantha technique. Right, so that's just sort of showing that you are using strategies that all of us can benefit from, and we're learning from you. And then, then it's like, oh, it's not about that pretty picture thing. It's like, I actually have something to share here with this. When you're giving student feedback, I want to remind people that for me, the two critical ideas, one is I notice how somebody is documenting things, a strategy that I can, like the Samantha technique, that I can put a spotlight on, or a specific observation that somebody made. So like, that's a really interesting observation, right? I will also engage people with the questions that they asked. Like, you asked this question, like, that's a really interesting question, right? And not so much that I'm going to then answer that question, but if that question, let's say, what are some possible explanations for that? Why could that be? How do we go about figuring that out? That's really interesting. And that question makes me think about this, right? So I'll ask a question behind the question, and we'll kind of engage with the questions, independent of whether or not the page looks pretty. And so what we're doing is I'm saying to them at the start, the journal is about our thinking, right? The journal is about engaging with ideas and observing and connecting with the world. And so when I'm giving feedback, I'm doing it on that same line, and not along the line of like, you drew such a pretty squirrel. I love that squirrel. It's the most pretty squirrel I've ever seen. You should feel really proud of yourself for drawing that squirrel, right? So not about that. Any fixes to common and simple problems that we're seeing in our nature journals that we could throw out here? We're now 1 minute over, but I want to see in kind of rapid fire round, are there any other little nuggets that people wanted to share of some solutions to common and simple problems as nature journaling? Billy Joe.
Yeah, I just so I've noticed a little bit that some kids are a bit shy about actually asking their I wonder questions, especially when we're online. And it's the sense I'm getting is that they don't want to ask a question that like everybody else knows the answer to, feeling like it's sort of a dumb question or a silly question. So I always say, like, it's not a lesson about knowing the answers, and it doesn't matter if everybody knows the answer to the question. You don't know the answer, and that's what's important, right? So, kind of spitballing the ideas around, and maybe if they give me one of their their I wonders and they share it, I'm like, yeah. And then what about this? And then what about this? And then what about this? And so I try to make them understand through like modeling that we took that one I wonder question and we're able to spiral it out into like 3 or 4 different I wonder questions, sort of giving them like, oh yeah, okay, it doesn't really matter if everybody else knows the answer because it's not about searching for them. And I always tell them like, you are not obligated to find the answers. If you want to, you can, but this is a lesson about learning how to ask questions and be curious. So I said, you want to put down as many questions as possible. Don't think like, oh, I'm going to have to answer all these if I put them down, so I only want to put down 3. No, like you want to put down like 20, 50, doesn't matter, because those questions, when you put them out into the world, can sometimes come back to us in different ways, right? So it's that sort of piece. And then I always tell them like, because some of them want to hold up their picture because kids really want to show their artwork. And I'm like, we can do that, but never, compare yours to someone else, because you're all different. You all think different. We are all different, and we bring something different to the table. So everybody's journal should look different. You shouldn't compare it to mine. You shouldn't compare it to anyone else's. And the only information that should be the same is that sort of metadata. The date should be the same. The weather could potentially be the same, and the location could potentially be the same. Other than that, your piece of nature is different. Everything is different. So let's share our I notices and our I wonders. And again, the same thing, I try to stick away from the pictures as much as possible, unless I say to them like, I notice that you put in, that scratch that you notice, or I notice that you added in the lines where your banana is, turning brown, like things like that, but not like it's a pretty picture. But I have been noticing lately, especially with the older classes, they are a little bit shy about the I wonders, and then usually when they sort of get spitballing into things, that they tend to open up a little bit more. But that's just something that I kind of noticed in the last little bit.
Billy Joe, I love the way that you're kind of emphasizing that it's not about, you don't have to answer all the questions that you ask. And a lot of people kind of get like what do you mean you don't have to answer the questions? Then they're not going to have any curiosity, and they're not, it's important. So the purpose, so if you come up with a question and just on its own, that question is going to release dopamine in your brain, and it's going to make, if you're curious about something, your brain works better, even if you're not answering that question. And very often you can come up with a question that's behind the question that's behind the question without actually answering those 2 questions in front of it. But you need to get those sort of low-hanging fruit questions. Like, so Billy Joe's talking about, like, start with whatever kind of where you are question. And then can we kind of build on that in these question chains? So you started asking this, and then that makes you wonder this about this, but if that, then this, but if that, then why this? And boom, now you've gotten somewhere, right?
Yeah, and sometimes they become those like big, like out of the world questions that would fall into our like leave it be questions, right? Which is the best part. Is I love it when we get into those like big out of the world, like I have no idea, but like what could it look like? A big one right now is, what came first, the orange or the color orange? Because they started asking these questions, and I'm like, that's so great, right? And then it spirals into all these other things. So that's what I like, is the spitballing. And then sometimes you get the kids spitballing onto somebody else's I wonder as well, which can be really fun. And now all of a sudden, even though it's online, you've got a community of people that are talking back and forth, and it's a discussion. It isn't just Billy Joe coming in and blah, 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 blah. It's, we are having like a session together, right? Like we are together in this, even though we're remote. That's the kind of stuff that I really like. And that's where I think that I wonder can really bring it out, which is pretty fun for me anyways. Well, and the kids too. So
that's cool. And then you're really leveraging that interaction to build this process. The last weekend, I saw an interesting example of exactly what you're talking about here, Billy Joe. I don't know if anybody's here ever had a chance to see some of the sketchbooks and journals of Fiona Galogally. She's a young nature journaler, and you can sometimes find her stuff up on the Nature Journal Club Facebook page. And something that's really interesting about it is that the pages are covered with questions. And so she says that if I felt that I had to answer each question, that would totally shut me down. Right. But so my two daughters got a chance to go nature journaling with masks on, social distanced, with Fiona Gologly. And they we went to tide pools, and we're looking around the tide pools, and then we focused on things, and my daughters 7 and 9 were journaling and Fiona was journaling. And at the end of that, we got together and we shared our thoughts and ideas. And Fiona showed, started, kind of her, like, I asked this question, then this question, then this question. And Amelia was kind of leaning in, and she said, how many questions did you ask? And she counted them up. It was 29 questions on this little page, right? There are 29 questions there. And Amelia said, like, I asked 2. And so just like there was this kind of moment there. And hold on, I'm going to run into the next room. I'm going to come back with something in just a moment. In the meantime, Billy Joe, tell everybody something cool. Not to put you on the spot.
No pressure, no pressure, no pressure. I don't know if I have anything cool to say. Yeah, I don't know. Does someone else want something to say?
Tell us about what the weather's like now in Ontario.
Yeah. Oh, what is the weather like today in Ontario? Well, it is cloudy. We are in rain, but no snow. But we did have snow about 2 weeks ago. But I was really cold. I had 2 hikes today, and I had to come home and have a shower because I was absolutely freezing. So the temperatures are still less than 10 degrees Celsius. And in Fahrenheit, I have no idea what that would be, but it is definitely still chilly here. Thanks, Laura.
It's the Ontario heat wave. Right. So the day after kind of hanging out with Fiona, we went to the zoo. And this is her journal page.
Wow.
Let's see. Right. So she was in a culture that supported the idea of asking more questions, and then had the role model of looking at somebody else's journals where there were so many questions, and it just motivates you to, like, I think I can do that too. And that's where the inspiration that we get from journaling in a community can really pull all of our work forward. And it's really clear. It was just one day to the next. So, my friends, we have looked at a lot of different strategies today on how to solve problems when we are out there nature journaling with our students. Problems will come up. It's not the perfect thing, but you've got just jumping back to that idea of a kind of agenda and being flexible and being able to kind of go with, find where they are, connect with that, and be willing to change your plans in the face of really what the reality is on the ground. We looked at also this wonderful idea of the power of intrinsic motivation in our class environment. And I think that that's something for us to not put to bed with the end of this video call, but to keep as an open issue in our minds and our thoughts. How does intrinsic motivation connect with my community and my classroom? And are there things that I can do to support that? And again, there's sort of 3 factors of intrinsic motivation: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And are there ways that I can design things that target those to help students be internally sparked by what they do? The research on intrinsic motivation is absolutely fascinating. And what I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest condensed version of it, and then we're going to close because we're 12 minutes over. Here's the Reader's Digest condensed version. If on an assembly line, you want people to produce more widgets or to lick more stamps, if you incentivize them by paying them more money, they will lick more stamps and produce more widgets. However, that activity does not take thinking. The minute you're doing a task that requires thinking, you the extrinsic motivation actually impairs your ability to think. There's research that was done where they basically presented people with what's called the candle problem. Where the candle problem is that you have you have two tacks, you have a candle, and you have a box of matches. And the challenge is, how can you affix a lit candle to the wall in such a way that it will be attached to the wall and also not drip wax on the ground? All right, that's the candle problem. And you put these tools in front of somebody and you say, go, and they try to figure it out. And if you've heard this before, then you kind of like, oh, I know that solution, I remembered it. But for most of us, if you haven't heard the candle problem before, like, oh, that's weird. How would you go about doing that? And you start kind of messing around with it. And it turns out that with messing around with this, I'm not going to tell you the answer, and don't look it up online. No, don't, right? You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. It'll take maybe, depending on who's doing it, when, how, it'll take more time or less time. But if I say that if you solve this in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to give you $20. And if you solve this in the next 10 minutes, then you get $10. And if you solve this in 15 minutes, you get $5. And if it takes more than that, you owe me $20. Or even if I don't have that like punishment in it. So you're going to have more difficulty doing it when you're incentivized by that extrinsic motivation. But if you're just thinking like, oh, this is an interesting problem, I'm going to give this a try. Like, what's going on with that? So things that require thinking, the extrinsic motivation impairs your ability to do higher order thinking. And you think about what is the carrot in almost all education? It's your grade. That's an extrinsic motivation. Isn't that interesting? What we saw earlier today with that, thinking about that class going on the radio, that wasn't about a grade. That was because they cared. That's interesting. Everybody, I want to thank you all for being here and for your participation in this. This has been a really interesting and useful workshop. A lot of really interesting ideas came up here. I am so grateful to have this community of experienced educators to bounce these ideas around with. Together, we're developing our best practices for this activity of nature journaling. In closing, does anybody have any final thoughts, comments, ideas, or community announcements? Rebekah.
Hi, I have an announcement. So registration just opened for the Wild Wonder Teacher Conference. So if you're not aware, this is a 2-day conference that will be right before Wild Wonder. I'm helping to organize it, and that is just open for registration now. Another thing, which you might not be aware of is the NJEF, the North American Association for Environmental Education, is currently accepting proposals for this year's conference, which will be virtual in the fall, and those are due May 7th. The theme is connection. It's like about connecting people to nature. There are a bunch of different subtopics. And I think nature journaling or something along these lines could be a really valuable addition to their conference, because I didn't see anything about nature journaling last year. And it doesn't seem like the application would take very long to do. So if anyone wanted to submit one, it's until Friday.
Thank you so much. So we've got NJEF and also the Wild Wonder Educator Conference right before the regular Wild Wonder session. So people can find a link to that probably on the Nature Journal Club Facebook page in our chat, also on johnmuirlaws.com. Rebekah just put it in there. Thank you so much. That's going to be really fun. That's going to be really useful. We're also going to hear from people who've been doing a little bit of research on the impact of nature journaling. We're going to also hear in that an amazing experience of what would happen if nature journaling happened in an entire school district and every kid, every week, in every grade was doing nature journaling. What would happen? Are you curious? It's going to blow you away. And so be lots of practical tools, tips, and ideas. It should be a wonderful conference. Rebekah, I'm so grateful to you for taking point in organizing that. Really delighted and happy to have you on board. Do you want to say something about your writing workshops?
Sure. So I'm still doing, so as you might have heard, I'm doing a writing workshop every Wednesday about how we can use words in our nature journals. So we just had one today, and we'll have one again next week. And those also, the recordings are available on my YouTube channel.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Any other announcements, thoughts, or ideas? Thank you all for being here. Really grateful to be part of this community. Be safe, be kind, go out in nature, and get yourself vaccinated. The vaccine is safe. The vaccine has been extensively tested, and it has now been used by, there's such a large number of people who have used it. We're able to learn a lot about the effect of this thing just by looking at that population. And for our ability to move forward as a functioning society, it's going to be really important for a bunch of us to get that bad boy in our arm. So please get that vaccination. And I also want to encourage people to talk to your friends. Talk to your friends and associates about the decisions that they're making. About 20% of the population in the United States is saying that they're not going to get themselves vaccinated. And we can do much better. And one of the most powerful things that we can do is to have chances to be in conversation with people that you know and you trust. And I want to encourage people to get yourself informed and be willing to, politely as a friend and ally to the people in your community, encourage them to do so as well. Everybody, thank you so much. And I really look forward to seeing you again soon.
Bye, everyone. Have a great night.
Have a great night.
Thank you.